Brought to you by...
Sometimes things just go wrong. No matter how hard we try and how meticulously we plan, sometimes things take a darker turn, and we find ourselves in a horrific situation where we have to fight to try and survive. Hello friends, and welcome back to ETF. Lost in the White is a visually striking, thematically chilling short horror film written and directed by Alessio Cubani. The film, which unfolds in the stark, unforgiving expanse of snowy mountains, tells the harrowing tale of a lone snowboarder who embarks on what he hopes will be the perfect downhill ride, only to find himself ensnared in a nightmarish struggle for survival. One of the film's standout features is its cinematography. The vast, desolate landscape of snow-covered mountains serves as both a breathtaking and terrifying backdrop. The whiteness of the snow is both beautiful and disorienting, creating a visual metaphor for the protagonist's isolation and impending doom. The wide shots capture the expansive, almost otherworldly nature of the environment, emphasizing the snowboarder's vulnerability in the face of nature's indifference. Cubani's direction is meticulous, with each shot designed to maximize tension. The silence of the mountains, broken only by the sound of wind and the snowboarder's movements, adds to the film's eerie atmosphere. The use of natural light and the monochromatic palette enhances the feeling of coldness and detachment, making the environment itself a character in the story, one that is as menacing as it is indifferent. The film's narrative is deceptively simple, but loaded with existential dread. After a violent fall, the snowboarder faints in the snow, far from civilization and any hope of rescue. When he awakens, disoriented and injured, his nightmare truly begins. The story taps into primal fears, isolation, the unforgiving power of nature, and the fragility of human life. As the snowboarder tries to find his way back to safety, the film delves into psychological horror. The vastness of the snow-covered landscape becomes a metaphor for the snowboarder's own mental unraveling. There's a haunting ambiguity in this narrative. It's unclear whether the threats he faces are real or the result of his disoriented mental state. The ambiguity enhances the horror, leaving the audience to question what is real and what is imagined. Given that Lost in the White is essentially a one-man show, the performance of the lead actor is crucial. The snowboarder, portrayed with a raw intensity, convincingly conveys the fear, desperation, and eventual resignation that come with being utterly alone in a hostile environment. The lack of dialogue means that the actor must rely on physicality and facial expressions to communicate his character's growing terror, which he does with remarkable effectiveness. The horror in the film is subtle and psychological rather than overt. There are no monsters or gore. Instead, the film relies on atmosphere, isolation, and the suggestion of something malevolent lurking just out of sight. The fear comes from the snowboarder's increasing disorientation, his struggle against the elements, and the creeping realization that he may never make it out alive. Looking at the film through a psychological lens uncovers deeper layers of the film's horror, focusing on the protagonist's mental and emotional unraveling in the face of extreme isolation and a relentless force of nature. The film serves as an exploration of the human psyche when pushed to its limits, where the boundaries between reality and hallucination blur, and primal fears take control. The film begins with the snowboarder seeking solitude in the snowy mountains, which initially represents freedom and a connection with nature. However, after this fall and a subsequent loss of consciousness, this solitude transforms into a terrifying isolation, Stranded far from civilization, the snowboarder is cut off from all forms of human contact, which becomes the catalyst for the psychological descent. Isolation is a powerful force in the film, amplifying the snowboarder's vulnerability. As he awakens alone in a vast, indifferent wilderness, the realization of his situation begins to weigh heavily on his mind. This overwhelming isolation leads to a heightened state of anxiety and paranoia, and the snowboarder's mind begins to struggle and cope with the stark reality of his predicament. The film effectively portrays how prolonged isolation can lead to a breakdown in mental stability, causing the protagonist to question his senses and his grip on reality. Nature in the film is not just a setting, but the antagonist. The snowy mountains, with their endless expanses of white, become a psychological maze from which the protagonist cannot escape. The environment's hostility is not overt. It does not actively seek to harm him, but its indifference is what makes it so terrifying. This indifference mirrors the snowboarder's growing sense of insignificance and powerlessness. As the protagonist attempts to navigate the landscape, he becomes increasingly disoriented. The vast whiteness, with no discernible landmarks, disorient him both physically and mentally. This disorientation is symbolic of his internal psychological confusion, as the environment begins to reflect his disoriented state of mind. The film taps into the psychological concept of agoraphobia, fear of open spaces, where the vastness of the environment becomes a source of anxiety rather than liberation. As the film progresses, the snowboarder's struggle against the elements takes on a more metaphorical dimension. His physical fight for survival mirrors his mental battle to maintain his sanity. The line between what is real and what is imagined becomes increasingly blurred, a common theme in psychological horror. The snowboarder's encounters with strange occurrences, whether they be real or hallucinations born of fear and exhaustion, underscore his mental unraveling. This descent into madness is a gradual process, marked by the snowboarder's growing sense of paranoia. The isolation and harsh conditions erode his mental resilience, and the film subtly suggests that the true horrors lie within the human mind. His fear becomes existential. It's not just about surviving the physical dangers, but also confronting the terrifying possibility that he might lose himself entirely, his sense of identity and reality, before the end. A significant theme in the film is the fear of the unknown. The protagonist's journey through a snow-covered wilderness is marked by uncertainty and unpredictability. This fear of the unknown, which we cover a lot on this channel, lies beyond the next ridge. What might be lurking in the snow, or even what is happening inside his own head, fuels the psychological tension. The film taps into primal fear, the fear of what we cannot understand, which becomes a projection of our worst anxieties. His struggle is not just against the physical environment, but also against the unknown forces within himself. His inability to trust his senses, or his perception of reality, adds a layer of psychological horror that is both compelling and deeply unsettling. Snow, in its truest form, can be seen as a metaphor for a blank slate, representing the protagonist's mental state. As the snowboarder navigates the endless whiteness, his mind similarly becomes a blank canvas, vulnerable to the disorientation of fear and isolation. The lack of visual markers in the landscape reflect the snowboarder's mental fog, where thoughts and perceptions become fragmented and unreliable. This overwhelming whiteness also symbolizing the erasing of identity and memory. As he becomes more lost, both physically and mentally, the snow seems to consume him, blurring his sense of self. This is where the psychological horror of the film becomes most potent. The film is not about being physically lost, but about losing one's mind in the process. Lost in White is a psychological horror film that masterfully explores themes of isolation, mental deterioration, and the fear of the unknown. Kobani's use of the stark, snowy landscape as a reflection of the protagonist's mental state is both visually and thematically effective. The film serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of the human mind when confronted with overwhelming forces of nature and solitude. From a psychological perspective, the film serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of the human mind when confronted with the overwhelming forces of nature and solitude. Well, friends, that's going to be all for now. If you enjoyed this video, I urge you to go check this one out for yourself. I've linked it down in the description below. Please consider giving this video a like, subscribe if you aren't already, share it with your friends, and if you really want to help support this channel, come find us on Patreon. Every little bit helps this channel grow and gets us closer to that ultimate goal of being able to make these videos for you full time. Until next time, stay safe, stay out of the cold, keep yourself warm, keep your mind from falling apart, and as always, thanks for watching.